Story 1. Any blunt instrument used to harmlessly render someone unconscious is too weak. People can and do die from highly undramatic head injuries. There's no way to hit someone to make them just sleep for half an hour. Story 2. I would say most hand-to-hand fight scenes between two humans in films are both too powerful and too weak at the same time. For example, those scenes where each powerful punch or kick is sending the opponent flying 10 feet into a wall. First of all, no human being has ever been powerful enough to do that. And secondly, if they were, you would be looking at hundreds, if not thousands, of pounds of pressure behind a blow like that. It would literally shatter the bones at the point of contact and most likely kill the person instantly. There is no getting up and wiping the blood off your face and fighting for another 10 minutes. Story 3. Shotguns are always just completely wrong. Massive spreads mean you don't have to aim, with numerous pellets destroying entire rooms. We're talking about dinner plate spreads at 40 yards or so. Story 4. Taser, it is not going to knock you out cold with a single quick zap. And any film where they give a crazy person a tranquilizer. Work on a mental health ward and see how ineffective it is for the most part. Story 5. The uppercut. Think about what it would actually take to lift the weight of a person with a punch. You are far more likely to break your wrist than actually shift a full-grown man off the floor and over a table or through a window. Also, any punch to the jaw that could do that would very likely snap their neck or at least fracture their jaw. Story 6. Whips are not even remotely effective as weapons. The way they are used in movies like Indiana Jones would be virtually impossible to do in real life. Whips are for controlling animals or torturing people. They have no practical combat applications. Story 7. Chainsaws. If you tried to saw a living being in half with one, it would struggle after the first few inches of meat as it was not made to cut uneven material that can get snagged on the chain and splatter around the motor. Story 8. Most weapons in movies are portrayed with exaggerated power. Hand grenades stand out. In movies, they create a huge fireball and explosion, but real ones just make a small bang. They aren't designed to cause massive explosions. They are designed to spray shrapnel in a confined space. Story 9. I always notice people hiding behind car doors or a flip table and things to protect themselves from gunfire, as if it would do anything against most firearms. The funny thing is I am from the United Kingdom, and I have only ever seen a real gun once or twice in my life on a police officer in an airport, and even I know it would not help you. Story 10. The Gatling gun in the Denzel remake of Magnificent Seven. That thing had an angle on every point in town and hit harder than a 30mm cannon in a Fairchild Republic A-10 Thunderbolt II. Story 11. Gunshot injuries often do not instantly incapacitate or kill people. A person can get hit half a dozen times, run away in a panic, and then lie down somewhere else and die. Story 12. Science fiction movies often require elaborate weapons to destroy a planet. The Death Star is the most notorious example. If you have ships capable of space travel, attach a thruster or a ship to an asteroid, and you are just a math problem away from a planet killer. Additionally, a sufficient number of large projectiles fired from multiple cannons could annihilate all cities. Story 13. Enemies impervious to bullets and monsters immune to missiles. At some point, the laws of the transfer of momentum require they get knocked back, even if they are unharmed. Story 14. In the most current Jurassic Park film, dinosaurs were put up for auction for military use for millions of dollars. You don't even need to feed your machine gun every day to keep it alive, and even the most basic current military weapons could easily kill those dinosaurs. Story 15. Most bullet wounds would completely stop the confrontation. No one would just keep going as if it didn't exist, and it takes a long time to heal from a bullet wound, especially in the internal organs or bone-shattering areas. Story 16. Katanas are way too powerful in most media. Hell, most swords for that matter. Spoilers, but a length of sharp steel or titanium or whatever, ignoring any magical or science fiction shenanigans, is not going to slice a 10-foot wide boulder or even a foot-thick tree in half like it's butter. It's a piece of metal, not a molecule-slicing sun laser. Story 17. Guns? In most movies, they don't even fire bullets. I recently watched a movie where the protagonist was fired upon in a hallway wide enough for two men to stand abreast. He ran from the shooter in this straight, thin hallway, and the shooter had an AK-47. I was taken out of the movie entirely and just stared in disbelief. How does Hollywood think that scene makes any sense? It's like that in most films. Guns don't fire bullets, or they magically cannot hit what they are aimed at. Absolutely bizarre. The John Wick movies, cool as they are, if real, would be like 30 minutes long tops. Story 18. Suppressors do not make guns silent. They can, however, significantly reduce the noise if you use a single shotgun with a small caliber, running subsonic rounds, and the suppressor is integral. They reduce the noise from immediate permanent hearing damage to damn that was loud. Notice how the sound, even with the suppressor, is still loud enough to echo off the hills. Again, it's noticeably quieter but not silent, as the sound is still echoing back. This Hollywood disinformation keeps them highly regulated in the United States, and some states outright ban them. Suppressors are hearing protection devices that reduce noise pollution. Some European countries require their use to reduce noise pollution when hunting or training. In a country with healthcare like the United States has, you would think hearing protection devices would be encouraged, not banned or locked behind $200 permission slips. But crime. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives put out a white paper saying suppressors are used in so few crimes they should be deregulated so they can focus on real crime. Suppressors are terrible for crime. 1. They're not actually silent. They increase the length of the weapon, making it harder to conceal. They get hot. Suppressors are literally the same thing as engine mufflers. They work by trapping and slowing the superheated gases from the burning of the fuel or gunpowder. This means they get very hot. Suppressors should not be so heavily restricted and, in some states, outright banned. This Hollywood disinformation scaring people who don't know anything. Story 19. Stealth kills with knives in both movies and video games. In media, you just grab a person next to another person, slit their throat, and lay them down softly on the ground without anyone across the room noticing. There is no way that you are going to silently grab someone from behind, jab a knife into their neck, and not have them thrash around and kick in a very loud and violent manner for at least 15 seconds. Story 20. Guns are weak in movies. Thin tables and car doors stop them when, in reality, the bullet would rip right through them. It's still a good idea to hide behind them because it messes with the shooter's aim not being able to see you, but in movies, they get peppered and barely dented. Bladed weapons have a habit of being stronger than in real life, with them never seeming to get blunted or chipped despite constant collisions with metal. I've even seen a few scenes where someone cuts off a person's head, which is much harder than they show in movies, with a knife too small to actually manage from the distance they were at. Story 21. Bullets. Once they hit, they just show a red spot in movies. In reality, they can take a chunk of flesh away, and a headshot will most likely deform a face badly. Story 22. Holding and hip-firing a .50 Browning machine gun is challenging. Those things are incredibly heavy, especially when getting one down from a vehicle mount on your own. Even more difficult is holding and firing a minigun. I'm going to assume they're even heavier than a Browning. They also require electrical power. Suppressors make it sound like an electric airsoft gun. Volume is a significant factor. The only movie I remember referencing how deafening a firearm is, particularly a machine gun firing rapidly, was Black Hawk Down. Fireballs from a grenade are often exaggerated. In fact, most explosions are over the top. Most explosives are just a huge release of energy, and any fireball is gone in a flash unless there's some kind of accelerant. Movies usually use a very small charge and a load of gasoline if they're doing practical effects and not using computer-generated imagery. Story 23. The noisy cricket is way more powerful in real life. I was not expecting to annihilate that Zarquestriad with a single shot. Be careful out there. Kids. Story 24. Plasma rifle in the 40-watt range. Some guy did the math a while back and showed that 40 watts would be the equivalent of a .22 long rifle firing 4 rounds per minute. For comparison, he showed that an M2.50 caliber firing 800 rounds per minute would be 241,000 watts, 241 kilowatts. A 20mm Vulcan cannon firing 6,000 rounds per minute would be 5,512,500 watts, 5.5 megawatts. Story 25. Not weapons, but suturing in real life without sterilized conditions, sterilized gloves, proper cleaning of the wounds, and antibiotics is just a death sentence, and sometimes a very horrible one. Story 26. Shotguns are overpowered at the right distance. With the right load, they can remove a pound of flesh, but they are never going to be able to send someone flying back like 5 feet. Otherwise, it would happen to the shooter every time they fired. Story 27. Any energy weapon is underpowered in movies because you can see them coming, like seeing the laser or blaster or whatever moving through the air at a speed below even a bullet. In Captain America Civil War, Falcon sees an energy beam coming at him from below and has time to look up again, tuck into a ball, and dodge it while it's moving at the speed of light. That beam would have been past the moon before he even saw it. Story 28. Not a specific weapon, but movies make it seem like child's play to hit a moving target in the arm or leg at any range. It really isn't that easy to do, especially with a pistol. Story 29. Almost all swords and other pointy, sharp weapons are overpowered. You cannot get through a full suit of armor with a sword. Most stealth weapons or techniques make it seem super easy to strangle someone from behind, knock them out, or shoot them before that person can react or make noise. Strangling and hitting people usually doesn't knock them out instantly, which is rarely the case. And if you do hit someone hard enough to knock them out, you might also kill them or leave them with brain damage. Most guns are overpowered, or rather the character using them is overpowered with perfect aim. People survive gunshot wounds all the time. People even survive many serious gunshot wounds. But guns are like an instant death curse, and they kill people instantly without the victim even screaming out. It takes very precise shooting to kill everyone instantly. Story 30. Punches are too weak in movies. One clean punch is all it takes to knock someone out. There are even cases in the United Kingdom of a single punch killing someone. Story 31. Swords are a terrible weapon when fighting against armored enemies. Blunt weapons like hammers, maces, and picks would have been more used and much more effective. In general, movies greatly underestimate how difficult it was to kill somebody in full armor. In many instances, it would take teams of 5 or more people to unhorse them and hold them down while somebody cut off plates or found a soft spot. Armored knights on trained war horses were the literal tanks of the Middle Ages. On the flip side, spears are by far the most used and most effective martial weapon from history, but they are underestimated in movies. Swords were basically showpieces during the Middle Ages. Spears were king. Also, I wanted to add that movies severely underestimate shields. They were probably the most important piece of equipment historically. The Romans basically conquered the world with shields. Story 32. Lots of good ones in here, especially about grenades not being fireballs and monsters ignoring the transfer of momentum in silly ways, but something else. Missiles. For some reason, missiles in films are always slow, always burn forever, and can follow any number of complex maneuvers around and through obstacles. In reality, even small man-portable surface-to-air missiles and anti-tank guided missiles have flight times measured in tens of seconds. Full-size surface-to-air missiles or air-to-air missiles will cover dozens of kilometers in that time, above Mach 2 even at low altitude, and gliding for the bulk of that time. Only very advanced air-to-air missiles are capable of missing and then reacquiring a target, and they are still moving much faster than they are ever portrayed in films. It always seems to dramatically downplay the real speed and danger of these systems. Story 33. One thing that bothers me as someone who is proficient with firearms is how when people are shot in movies with smaller caliber weapons, they often drop dead instantly. Small caliber weapons do a lot of damage, but rarely does someone just slump over dead in a split second. They could continue fighting you, inflicting lethal wounds, before they go into shock. Story 34. Gravity. People falling off a 2 to 3-story building onto concrete, then getting up and fighting anything. That's not going to happen. Even falling down while standing, like after a kick or punch, that can mess you up pretty well. Story 35. Guns. You either need to unload a metric ton of ammunition into the target as they continue to march straight toward you, or they push you through 3 brick walls and knock over the neighbor's car. Story 36. Medieval armor, especially the kind of plate mail you associate with knights in fantasy, is rarely portrayed with the respect it deserves. A good suit of armor rendered you basically immune to most slashing or stabbing attacks, so the image of two knights hacking away at each other with swords is pure fiction. You had to specifically expose and target areas where armor was either weaker or non-existent, such as joints, neck, and groin. Sure, being bashed by a sword or arrow would tire you out, but there is simply no way that breastplate is getting punctured like you see in so much fantasy media. As long as I am on the topic, plate armor is generally pretty anachronistic in most medieval fantasy. The big, fancy, heavy armor you normally see was very late medieval or early Renaissance. Story 37. It's not really a weapon, and I don't have a specific example, but I've been noticing more how silly it is how easily people get taken out in a fight. Like you have your badass martial arts prodigy main character surrounded by 20 enemies. Taps one guy on the shoulder, and the guy instantly collapses. Kicks one in the stomach, and he's done for. Grabs another guy's shirt and throws him 2 feet. Instant knockout. It is very rarely done in a realistic way. The guy taking a strong kick doesn't kneel and hold his stomach. He just flinches and stops moving. It's like the main character's real power is electricity, and all he has to do is touch you for you to pass out.